He was my father. She was my wife. And together, they destroyed everything I believed in. But it wasn't just betrayal. It was the reopening of a wound I thought I'd buried forever. A dark family secret. A repressed trauma. And the devastating cost of pretending to be okay for too long. Thank you to all my loyal subscribers and gifters who've supported these real, raw life stories. Your encouragement gives strength to voices that have been silent for too long. If this chapter resonates with you, leave a like or comment. Every story shared here matters. I used to think my biggest flaw was that I trusted too easily. But that wasn't it. My real problem? I loved too hard. Too blindly. I held people close, even when they were slowly cutting me open from the inside. I married Julia when I was 27. She was light. Joy. Laughter that filled a room. She didn't just walk into my life, she brightened it. And my father? Alan. A man who could command any room. Navy veteran. Self-made business owner. Charismatic to the point of discomfort. But he was my dad. I never dared question him. Even when I should have. Julia loved him instantly. It's wild how much you two are alike, she'd say. I'd laugh it off. But deep down, I always hated that comparison. Our marriage was good, until it wasn't. Little things started to feel off. Julia stayed late at my parents' place when I wasn't around. She smiled a little too wide when Dad made his usual jokes. And there were glances, quick ones, but real enough to leave a pit in my stomach. I gaslit myself out of it. Told myself I was jealous. Insecure. After all, they were family. But I started noticing patterns. One weekend, I got home from work early. Julia wasn't there. I called. No answer. Checked her location, she turned it off. She never turned it off. So I drove to the one place I never expected to find what I did, my parents' house. She wasn't parked out front. No trace. But when I unlocked the side gate, one I had the code to since I was a kid, I walked around the back, and I saw something through the den window that I still can't unsee. My wife. My father. Entangled on the leather couch I sat on every Christmas. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was rehearsed. Comfortable. My legs gave out. I fell to the ground, breath gone. But I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I just walked back to my car, and drove. I went home. Sat in the dark. And cried like a child. But the story doesn't end there. Because that moment broke more than my heart, it cracked open something I had buried for decades. Something about my father. Something from when I was a child. Something I never wanted to remember. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't drink. I didn't scream. I just sat on the floor of our bedroom, alone, watching the shadows move across the walls as the hours passed. I tried to reason it out in my head. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe. But no. You know the difference between a mistake and an affair. You feel it in your gut. In your bones. And when the betrayal comes from the two people who were supposed to love you the most, the air feels thick, like grief. That night, I started remembering things. Not just what I saw. But what I had forgotten for years. Childhood memories are tricky. They're like old VHS tapes, played too many times, some parts fuzzed out, others erased completely. But one memory came back clearer than ever. I was 10. It was summer. Mom had gone to visit her sister for a few days. Dad was home with me. I remember how loud the air conditioning was that night. How I hated the dark. How Dad sat next to my bed after I'd had a nightmare. But what came back next wasn't soothing. It was the way he placed his hand on my shoulder. How it lingered. How he whispered, "It's just a dream, you're okay," in a tone that didn't feel right. I'd never let myself think about that night again. But now I couldn't stop. And suddenly, things started connecting. Why I'd always felt uncomfortable being alone with him after that. Why I always tensed up when he hugged me too long. Why I flinched when he raised his voice, even in a joke. Why I never told anyone. Because I couldn't name it. But it stayed with me. And now, years later, watching the woman I loved in his arms brought it all crashing back. I wasn't just betrayed as a husband. I was betrayed as a son. Twice. Once as a child. Again as a man. The next morning, Julia came home. She didn't know I'd seen them. Didn't know I had unlocked that hidden part of my past. She greeted me like nothing had happened. I watched her, silent, and just said, "I know." She froze. "What?" "I saw you. At my parents' house. You and him." The blood drained from her face. "I can explain." I raised my hand. "Don't. Just don't." Her voice broke. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just happened. I said, not shouting, but every word was a blade. "With my father?" Tears. Real ones. But they didn't move me. She whispered, "There's something wrong with him. I think you know that." And that was the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a marriage betrayal. This was generational rot. A pattern. My father was not just a bad man. He was dangerous. And Julia? She was broken in her own ways, maybe manipulated. But she still chose him. She still looked me in the eye every night and said, "I love you," knowing what she was doing. So no, I didn't explode. I didn't burn the house down. I didn't post anything online. I just packed my bag and left. Because I needed to find the one thing I'd never had. Peace. But what happened next wasn't the end. Because when I confronted him, I realized I was still the boy sitting in that dark room, desperate to be believed. And somehow, I ended up doing the one thing no one expected. I forgave them. But not the way you think. I didn't tell my mother. Not yet. Not because I wanted to protect my father, but because I knew telling her would collapse everything. Their marriage. Her sense of self. Our entire family. And maybe, deep down, I was still that same little boy, hoping I was wrong. But I wasn't. I called him 2 days after I left the house. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, son. Everything okay?" Even his voice was calculated. Warm. Disarming. I stayed silent for a second. Then I said, "We need to talk." He didn't hesitate. "Come by the shop." After hours. He always liked his home turf. His place. His rules. I almost laughed. He had no idea what was coming. That night, I stood in the old hardware store my dad had owned for decades. I used to ride my bike there after school. I knew every aisle by heart. The place smelled like dust, oil, and betrayal. He waited behind the counter like it was just another day. "Glad you came," he said. "You look tired." "I saw you," I said quietly. His smile dropped. "Saw me?" "You and Julia. Saturday. In the den." For the first time in my life, Alan, my father, didn't have a word ready. "You shouldn't have been there," he finally muttered. "Seriously?" I laughed bitterly. "That's your response?" He walked around the counter, still calm. Still the performer. I know how this looks. No, you don't. Because this isn't just about her. I stepped forward. This is about me. About what you did. About what I remember. His eyes narrowed. I remember that night when I was 10. When Mom was gone. He went still. Rigid. I remember your hand. I remember the way you sat too close. The way you whispered. The way I never felt safe around you again. He said nothing. For a long time. Then finally, he exhaled. You're confused, he said softly. You were a scared kid. You had nightmares. I was trying to comfort you. I've spent my whole life gaslighting myself into believing that, I said. But you know what the worst part is? He tilted his head. I wanted to believe you were a good man so badly. I never let myself see who you really were. Until I caught you with my wife. He looked older in that moment. Like I had peeled back the years of control, and he finally saw himself for what he was. I didn't mean to hurt you, he whispered. But you did. Over and over. And you smiled through all of it. Here's the part most people don't understand. I didn't scream. I didn't punch him. I didn't ruin him in court or destroy the store. I just looked at him and said, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. But because I deserve peace. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I'm walking away from all of this. From you. From her. From pretending. I'm not carrying your poison anymore. Then I turned. And I walked out. He didn't follow. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about finally letting go of the rope that's been cutting your hands for years. I didn't forgive him to heal him. I did it to heal me. The next day, I filed for divorce. I wrote my mother a letter. I told her only what she needed to know. And I booked a one-way flight out of state. No social media announcements. No revenge posts. Just silence. Leaving was the hardest and easiest thing I've ever done. The physical distance gave me space to breathe, but my mind was still chained to the past, the pain, the memories, the betrayal. I tried to write to Julia, my ex-wife. Not to beg or blame, but to find some clarity. Maybe even some closure. I poured my heart onto paper, letters I never sent, words she never read. Dear Julia. I don't hate you. I hate what happened between us, but not you. I keep replaying that day, when I walked in on you and my father. I keep asking why. Was it manipulation? Loneliness? Weakness? I wish I understood. Maybe if I did, I could forgive you better. But right now, I'm just broken. I hope you find peace. I hope you find yourself. And I hope you never hurt like this again. Each letter was a mirror, reflecting my own pain and confusion back at me. But no reply came. No explanation. No apology. Just silence. Meanwhile, my mother reached out. She had read the letter I sent her. She cried on the phone, but never once blamed me. She thanked me for being honest, for finally breaking the silence that had suffocated us all. She confessed her own truth. How she'd suspected something for years but was too scared to ask. How she had buried her pain to keep the family together. How she wished she'd known sooner. That conversation was the first real healing I experienced. But the real breakthrough came months later when I started therapy. I needed someone to hold my story without judgment. To untangle the knot of trauma, betrayal, and guilt. To help me rebuild what was broken inside. For the first time, I faced my childhood memories honestly. I gave myself permission to feel the fear I'd hidden for decades. I started to understand that healing isn't linear, it's messy, painful, and slow. And slowly, I found the strength to live again. I forgave my father. I forgave Julia. Mostly, I forgave myself. Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself. Starting over felt impossible at first. I was a man stripped bare, no family, no home, just memories that felt like scars. But the hardest part was learning to trust again. Trust in others. Trust in myself. I moved to a new city, far from everything familiar. A place where no one knew my past. Where I could build a new life, brick by brick. I found a small apartment and a steady job. I made new friends. I even started dating, carefully, slowly. The wounds never fully disappeared. Some days, they ached like they just happened yesterday. But I learned to carry them differently. They were reminders of my strength. Of the battles I survived. Of the man I chose to become. Forgiveness gave me freedom. But it didn't erase the past. Instead, it lit a path forward. I started volunteering with a support group for survivors of abuse and betrayal. Sharing my story helped others heal, and theirs helped me heal in return. It was a way to transform pain into purpose. And one day, I realized I was truly free. Free from anger. Free from fear. Free from the chains that held me for so long. I'm still learning. Still growing. But I'm no longer defined by what happened to me. I am defined by how I chose to rise. Thank you for listening to my story. If you or someone you know is struggling with betrayal or trauma, please remember. You are not alone. There is help. And there is hope. That's the end.